I don't think you know that I know that you're one of like the earliest adopters of like powerlifting training over here, of the people that are still in it now. Like you were probably one of the first people to use RPE, I would imagine. Didn't you have a YouTube channel when you were like 15 or 16?
I do. I still have it, and it's still up there now.
Amazing.
It's like, I think there's like 500 videos on it or something. He's like
500?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, man. Yeah, it was crazy. I used to put up a couple of videos a week. Like,
did you know I knew that?
No, but you definitely went and researched it.
I did.
I was guessing it.
I've had it.
I think it's still out there. I'm not going to say the name.
I'm sure people can find it if they look
but yeah, I think it still has a couple of hundred subscribers, like 500 or 600 subscribers. Yeah.
So initially, where was it? What was that point like? You know what? Powerlifting's what I do.
Yeah. So it's a long story.
Great. Perfect placement.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect placement. So if we initially start with powerlifting, well, we're going to have to go back to the start. So when I was young, let's say 11 or 12, now I'm going to get timelines and dates mixed up, but
that's fine.
It is. I was quite an overweight kid, like extremely overweight. If I showed you some photos, I just look like a chipmunk with my cheeks just puffed out, like holding berries for the winter. And I got into the gym. So I got into the gym, I reckon, when I was 12 or 13. And my mom obviously had to forge a signature saying he was 15 and 16. It was actually the Ben Dunn Gym in Lucan. I don't know if you know that. It used to be above the Lidl at the Penny Hill there.
I know, yeah.
So I used to go there, and I started going there and I started training because initially I played rugby for a long time. Yeah. I think I started rugby at 10. Obviously big kid, started as a prop. And then I went to the gym and I decided I want to lose some weight. Started going to the gym, losing some weight, but I went the opposite way. So this is a conversation I actually only had with someone yesterday with clients is, I find it very good that when I work with people for nutrition or anything like that, that I've been on both ends of the scale. So I've been extremely overweight, but I also went the opposite way of extremely underweight. The only way I could describe it was, I don't like using this word because it's not fair on obviously people who have it, but it was like almost like borderline sort of anorexia. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would eat 1 or 2 things a day and do like 4 or 5 hours of cardio. Now, it wasn't quite as extreme, and I know a lot of people suffer with that, so I don't mean to diminish anyone by saying that, but that's the only way I can describe it in my mind. I can't use another word. That I went so bad with food and losing weight that I went so small and skinny. If I put the photo side by side and showed you, the drastic change is unbelievable. And I just thought that's what I had to do. Do you know what I mean? And then obviously my position started changing in rugby. I went from a prop to then I think I was playing like flankers, and then I was playing hooker, played on the wing for a bit as well. And then I decided that I was good at rugby, and I decided to start bulking up. So I actually was good enough on rugby that I actually got selected for the North Midlands development squad.
Amazing.
So it was actually funny, the trials that we done, I think it was up in Kildare, I think we done the trials. I actually broke my hand during the trials.
Right.
So I didn't think I was going to do it. I went in for a tackle, and when I went in, your man hit, and it like broke my thumb and done all my ligaments in here. And a couple of weeks later, I actually got a call that I'd got a call back down to, I think they whittled it down to like a 32-man squad or something like that. Went through a season of playing that. Initially thought that's the route I was going to go. And I know this is kind of bold to say, but I actually thought and still do think and believe that I actually had the skill and the ability to go quite far in rugby. And that kind of plays on my mind sometimes, because a lot of it was down to politics. So the people that got chosen and went through, you know yourself in sport, the way it works.
Yeah.
A little bit less in powerlifting, which is what I like. There's a lot less politics. The lads who went through, there was like 2 or 3 lads at the end of the season that went through. Their parents kind of knew the coaches, who know the parents, who knows the coaches, which was quite frustrating. So I started bulking up while I was in that, and I started just going ham in the gym and training the strength and conditioning that the guys done with us in the North Midland squad and stuff like that. Looking back on it now, and even then at a young age, I thought it was absolutely crap.
Right.
Like it wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't good enough. It was more so, the old school other kids, let's do them small bits of this and that and mad stuff with balls and all this. And it was just like, oh my God. It was like we do an hour of like strength training and then straight out onto the pitch because we had such limited time. And then I was also training for my club. But then I was also doing the gym at the same time as well. So that ended. Wasn't with North Midlands anymore. Obviously was still with my club. Ended up hurting my foot while I was with my club. I think I'm around 16 at this age.
And down to 2 limbs.
And down to 2 limbs, yeah. I think I hurt my foot and I couldn't run. Okay. So I couldn't run at all. And I was like, okay, but I was still in the gym and I was still lifting extremely heavy, which was kind of weird doing the boat. Like, this is funny. You know the way everyone, when they're young, they do chest days. Come in Monday, do chest days.
Yeah.
Monday was my leg day, right? And this actually feeds into why my bench has been so crap for so many years. I used to train legs 3 days a week. My heaviest leg day would be on a Friday or a Saturday, the day before my match.
Right.
It was strange.
So self-sabotage.
Don't know why I do it. Used to love going in, train heavy legs, wake the next day, play a match, perform really well. It is what it is. But on Monday, I used to love it because I'd go to the gym and I'd be able to train legs because everyone's over there pumping chest and I'd be over in the squat rack.
Yeah. Look at that sadist over there.
Yeah, literally. Oh, stop. It was, and especially in a gym like that, because like I think at one stage that gym had like 600 or 700 members.
Yeah.
In a gym that could probably only fit 100. It was crazy. But what would you do with a gym that had a membership? It was €99 for a year or something like that.
Ludicrousy.
Crazy. So I was lifting heavy in the gym in Benlon. I was always known as the kid with the pink belt. I don't know if you've seen early photos of me in my lifting career.
I've got like a nudge of a memory of seeing something. I can't picture it exactly, but I remember. Did you have pink socks or something like that, or a headband at one stage as well?
Well, always, I used to have the headband, the Irish headband, which another stupid IPF rule. You're not allowed to wear multicolored headbands anymore. Right. You have to wear a solid colored headband now. That'll never come back at an international or anything. But I used to wear pink belt all the time. I've had orange shoes and stuff like that. Just kind of stand out a little bit. But I was always known as like the strong kid with the pink belt. And like I said, I couldn't run, but I could still lift really heavily. And when I was 16, I was squatting like 200 kilo. I was deadlifting like a little bit over that. I think it was like 220 odd. Now, bench was crap. It was like 100 kilo or whatever it was. But I literally had just stumbled across this thing called powerlifting out of nowhere. I'm the definition of what people would call like a YouTube kid. So when I was that young, I used to watch so much information and content. Like mainly bodybuilding is where I started. But like I know like all the OGs of the YouTube, the guys who started YouTube and bodybuilding and stuff like that. From the start, I'd watch so much of it, hours upon hours upon hours of content. Like it was crazy the amount I would watch it.
Any standouts that come to mind?
The main one that I used to watch was Matt Ogus. I don't know if you know Matt Ogus.
I do know Matt Ogus, yeah.
Chris Lovato, who, by the way, Chris Lovato has now started powerlifting and is with Joe Sullivan.
No way.
Seen it a few days ago. He came back, Yuki Lovato. And I was so thrilled when I seen that because it brought me right back to my early days. I was like, this is crazy. Him, obviously, the 3DMJ guys as well, who obviously the pioneers of if it fits your macros. And if you've watched my YouTube channel, when you said there, it was kind of like at the start there that I started doing that as well. I just kind of stumbled onto powerlifting because those guys sometimes would talk about it as well. I think one or two of them would do powerlifting meets. And then I just kind of found the IPO. Yeah. And I went to the IPO. And my first meet when I went in, I think I took like all the teen records, something like that. Straight away in and absolutely loved it. Now, my first meet was crazy. It's like, I know Ben was on here talking about the story as well. It was, 10 hours long. You'd have a carvery between your bench and stuff like that because it was in a hotel. Yeah. It was crazy. My first experience with powerlifting meet was I done my squats. I came out and I can't remember his name for the life of me. He was squatting like 340. I was in the front row. He went down. He snapped both his quad tendons. Oh, that was my first experience. Now I am delighted that I got to squat first. Yeah, but I was in front view of this guy. He was coming down, and as he came down, both of his quad tendons snapped completely off the bone with 340 kilos on his back. Jesus Christ. And I think I was like 16, 17 at the time when I seen this happen. And kind of fell in love from there after seeing that. I was like, awesome. This shit's cool. Poor for that guy, but like this shit's cool, Yeah. But I'm delighted I got to squat before him because I don't know if I would have actually went out and squatted.
Well, the fact that you stuck around the sport this long means it didn't shake you that much.
No, it probably actually drove me more into the sport because I was like, this is kind of extreme. This is, this is cool.
It's kind of badass.
Which is funny as well because I actually done that first meet in wraps as well.
So your first ever exposure to powerlifting was in wraps?
Wraps, monolift, deadlift bar.
No way, man.
IPO reels, yeah.
So coming from that background, so obviously it's fairly plain to see that you had a massive interest in lifting. You got into rugby, which I think is like the default for most powerlifters that
especially in this country.
100%. Yeah. It's actually one thing I've touched off a little bit in other episodes, but it's something I'm a big advocate for. I think one of the benefits to powerlifting here is that like community and club mentality. And I think a lot of that comes from field sports. It's not just you're part of this team. Whereas like in a lot of other countries, you don't see it as much. I know Beck I've had on has talked about that. It's very like not prevalent in the UK at all. No one lifts that way. Everyone trains by themselves. And I can actually see it now in the younger cohort, like the TikTok generation of powerlifters. A lot of them are very much they come in, and if there's like 3 racks and they're all taken, they're like, where am I going to try? And it's like, fucking working with someone. But they want to stick their headphones on, ignore everybody. You know what I mean? Take their videos. Not all of them, obviously. But in any case, that's it's one of the things I like about, say, like we've got, like, I know when I think of like Scott Dean or fucking Ben Harrison or Keane Robinson or whoever, I think of chaos. You know what I mean? Whereas like, I'm sure like when people think of like, well, I was going to say when people think of Jay Farr, they think of Adolf Hitler. But you get what I mean? You think of like, you know, Keane Madden previously, Emma McDermott, Davidas, you think of Abs, you know what I mean? Et cetera,
absolutely,
et cetera. But in any case, given you had that entry into the sport, you found you really loved the weight room, and then you had this like insatiable need to absorb information through YouTube. Did this then inform some of your decision making to become a coach yourself?
Yes and no. So my path to becoming a coach is probably a lot different to most people, and I say this in a way of no disrespect to any of my lifters or people that I coach. I never wanted to be a coach, I don't think. And I kind of just fell into my lap. So if we take it from when I done that first powerlifting meet, I had done a second powerlifting meet in the IPO. I'd never coached really anyone. You know, I just kind of progressed with my powerlifting career. It progressed on. I moved to the IPF pretty soon after then when I went to college. I done my first meet in RevFit.
2017?
Yeah, could have been that. Yeah, I was 83. I weighed in at 83. Funny thing was, I think has it been taken out? Yeah, it got taken. The squat in that 83 on the Chaos board has been there for like the last 6 odd years or whatever it was. Right. I think I squatted 220 at 17, just nearly 18. At 83, I think I benched 115, and I think I pulled something like 250 maybe, something like that. And that was like my first experience obviously into the IPF, but I was in college at the time doing sports science, strength and conditioning. Didn't want to do it, so I hated school. My brother actually took my CEO your CEO access or whatever it is, you know, that you sign up for college, can't remember the name of it, and signed me up to like 5 college courses, and was like, here's 5 college courses, you're going to go to one of these, because I didn't want to do it. So I hated school, didn't want to go to college, and I ended up getting accepted into LIT, which is called something else now. I can't remember what it's called. They've changed their name completely, but it was the Limerick Institute of Technology, Sports Strength and Conditioning. And I went and I done that. Absolutely hated it. No, genuinely hated it. The first year I spent in college, I spent down there in Tip Monday to Friday, in student accommodation that I swiftly moved into someone's house in Diggs, because student accommodation was scary. It was awful. The lads literally just like burnt all the furniture and everything and broke all the windows. It was dreadful.
That's just Limerick now, Tipperary now.
Probably.
That's just the culture in that part of the world.
Yeah, probably is. I've only had one experience of being in that town.
Like that on fire.
Yeah, literally. Like, but the thing was, there was none of the lads from Tip actually in the college, so it was every other county coming in.
Even worse.
Yeah. So yeah, I done that in college, and that was more geared towards like S&C with sports teams, especially as well.
Totally different.
Now, there was obviously individual stuff that you would use, but I knew for a fact that I didn't want to work with sports teams. I cannot handle. It's not that I cannot handle. I don't like handling more than one individual at a time, which is quite contrary to what I do as a job right now with Chaos, where we do like 9 people in a class. Slightly different setting though, because with a sports team, you're obviously dealing with a lot of egos and a lot of people. And I can't deal with, especially lads that come in that say they're having a bad day or whatever, or they're fatigued and you need to drop down their weights or whatever. If you needed to do that, you're like, okay, well, based off the markers and your performances, you're a little bit fatigued. We need to go a little bit easier in this session, you know, and they start going, I'm going to lift loads of weights today. Can't handle that. I wouldn't be able to handle that, especially in a group setting with like 30 people. So I knew that's not what I wanted to do. And went through my second year in college. Was fine, everything was fine. I drove up and back to Tipperary every single day in my second year of college. I didn't actually stay
How long
there.
did that take?
legally 100 or an hour and 30 minutes.
Legally,
in my micro, probably an
so,
hour.
so hypothetically,
I bet you can get there in an hour. Yeah,
okay, cool.
in a micro.
Not that you'd know.
Yeah. In a gold micro because it goes quicker. With an Ohio bar in the back, by the way, that I drove up and down every day.
I did hear about you bringing your bar up and down. I've heard about that.
Yeah. Because I used to drive home and drive straight to Chaos, and at that time Ben didn't own Chaos. He was just a coach there.
That's right. Yeah.
They didn't have a bar, so it was like it's like the first piece of powerlifting equipment.
Still have it?
Into yeah, still at home.
Amazing.
Perfect conditioning
Piece
as well.
of history.
Oh, absolutely.
One thing I think is like I can't get over now, and I think a lot of the people that have entered powerlifting in the past 3 or 4 years cannot appreciate is how little powerlifting equipment there was in this country like 6 years ago.
Oh, it was crazy. Like that bar changed that gym for me when I was able to train there. I think it cost me like €420 delivered at the time. And it was like, I was like, okay, of everything that I could need, it's like the weights weigh what they weigh, which actually is another story we can get onto it in a few minutes because apparently they actually don't. The bar was like, okay, that's going to be a game changer because it's stiff. Yeah. It's what we use across the tree lifts. It's not that expensive. I can use a little bit of my college money, get it, and it'll last me a lifetime, which it has if you look after it,
100%, yeah.
But if we're talking about in terms of, me getting onto coaching then, when I was kind of in my third year of college, I actually got really sick. Which a lot of people don't know. When I came back from Calgary, I don't know if my first ever international, right? I got very sick when I got to Calgary, like extremely sick. To this day, I still don't know what happened. But when I got there, I was very dizzy, very sick. I lay in bed, didn't know if I was going to be able to compete, couldn't eat food, everything. Didn't know what it was, thought it was just a little bit of travel sickness. Competed. Squats didn't turn up well on that day. I remember Jay and Louis were handling me. It was my first ever experience of actually them handling me as well. And I remember actually getting frustrated at Jay because he was handling me and they were like giving me commands and like, take your headphones out in the warm-up room. And they were like, you can't like have your headphones on. And to me, being a young kind of like, bullheaded person in the sport, I was no, I gotta have my headphones and stuff like that, which I understand why they were doing it because it's obviously different when you go out on the platform, especially in international. Squats didn't go very well, but then we changed the plan and I remember going 3 for 3 on bench and 3 for 3 from deadlift and doing something like, I think it was an 8 for 9 performance or something like that, and it was a pretty good junior performance. I came back from Calgary. I started working in M50 truck and van with my brother that summer. And I got really unwell and something out of nowhere happened to me. To this day, we still don't know what it was. I started getting dizzy. I couldn't stand up. Lots of stuff I was having severe amount of panic attacks, like 15 to 20 panic attacks a day. Like it was crazy. Thought my whole life was over. And I would spend every day, I spent nearly close to 15 weeks in bed. Like could not get out of bed, which was scary. So I had to do my whole third year of college in bed essentially. Done every exam that I had to do kind of at the end of the year, and they allowed me to do like all my practical exams in one day. So yeah, that was extremely scary. And then I remember kind of towards the end of that and coming out of that, I ended up working with a rehab specialist for like dizziness, which I didn't know was a thing, that when you have like any sort of vertigo or anything like that, there's no like medications or stuff you can take. There's medications to like dull the symptoms, but you actually need to do physical rehab, which is quite strange, but I actually found it quite interesting because I was able to basically rehab myself like I would with training. Do you know what I mean? And then in terms of becoming a coach, I spent so much time around Chaos. I would never ever leave. That one day I got qualified obviously in college, that Ben literally got down on his knees and proposed to me. We actually still have the photo on the Chaos Instagram page. He asked me to be a coach. And that's kind of how coaching fell into my lap. Well,
that's quite like a turbulent story. But
yeah.
That 15 weeks you were bedbound.
Yeah.
Had you like lost motor function?
No, I hadn't lost motor function. So my body was physically and well able and capable to do stuff. This is funny because this is actually after the first time I competed in the Abs Pro as well. I competed in that when I was quite unwell, extremely unwell. It was more so when I'd done stuff or I expended energy, I got extremely tired and dizzy constantly. Okay. And I basically just couldn't be upright. So basically what we've put it down to over the last couple of years was I may have, when I went to Canada, got some sort of extremely bad ear infection, which affected the labyrinth, we think, in my ear. That gave me a really bad infection. That gave me basically a vestibular injury, essentially. And I went and I got loads of tests done. And what they put it down to this thing, it's called like triple PD, which is persistent postural proprioceptional dizziness.
Right.
Which essentially, in layman's terms, is you're fucking dizzy all the time and you can't stand up. So it's like vertigo, but on steroids.
So it's fair to say for at least 15 weeks you didn't go near the gym.
Oh, I didn't train at all.
Tell me a little bit more about that then. You obviously went from competing at a very high level internationally to then coming home being bedbound for 15 plus weeks.
Yeah.
How did you get back to doing what you're doing now? Because obviously you lift quite impressive weights. You know, what was it like going back into the gym for the first time?
It was incredible. I still I'm obviously getting a little bit emotional about it now. I remember the first time I walked into Chaos, it was literally just to sit on the couch. We used to have these couches in Chaos, just like these recliners that we'd all sit on. And I remember going back and seeing the lads for the first time because I was so heavily involved in powerlifting and everything. And I remember going back and going in for the first time. And it was literally just to sit on the couch for 20 minutes and talk to the guys before I went back home. How I got back to lifting in there was I literally didn't have a choice. I didn't have an option. It's something I had to do. And it was something that I knew would happen eventually, but I just didn't know how to get there. And whether or not I had this thing that different doctors or different people told me I had, it gave me a route to be able to go see a specialist who helped me kind of just regain control of my life again. So I made kind of a conscious decision was, okay, well, the first thing is I need to not be able to be in bed constantly. So what's that look like? Okay, well, I need to be up for a couple of hours every day. Okay. After that, what does it look like? It means going out for like a 5-minute walk, because also what I had, and it still happens to me sometimes, is you get very disassociated from your environment. So like, it was really weird. You would be walking around and like, you know, when you're drunk and like you think there's a tree there and it's actually miles away and you go grab it, and you're very disassociated from your surroundings. That's the only way I can describe it. It's like vertigo and being drunk all at the same time. Which kind of sets panic off in your body then, and then you go into having like panic attacks and everything else that comes along with it. So I started a plan with that, and then I started going to the gym. And when I went to the gym, how I started was literally just my physical rehab. So I had multiple things where I had to like look at pens and move my head. It's basically training your eye and your body to be able to move in the environment and like kind of catch up with itself. So you're able to be in your environment without getting dizzy. You know, if you shake your head a lot, you're going to get dizzy. It's basically, I was doing that, but it was like slowly moving my head to train myself to be like, okay, well, if you move quick, you're not going to get dizzy. We started with that. And then the guy that I was working with, shout out to the Balance Clinic. I actually don't remember much of it. I can't remember your man's name, but it was called the Balance Clinic somewhere in town. Was just like, you need to get back under a bar. He was like, you need to get back under a bar, and then you need to train your body then at the movements to not be dizzy. So I started doing that and progressed. Like I said, I seemed like I had no option. I had to get back. That's something we can touch on in a minute if you want to. Why? And I slowly programmed myself to getting back. I'd done a comp, and I believe at the time, now I could be wrong, when I went back and done that Limerick comp, it was the biggest junior total ever by a junior at that stage. I think it was like 715 or 720. I think it might have been the biggest 105 junior total, I'm not too sure, or the biggest junior total in the Irish PF in the country at that time. And that was after 10 weeks from the day that I walked back into the gym. Yeah, so I went from not being able to do anything to hitting one of the biggest junior totals.
That was going to be my next question, and there's definitely a couple of things I want to touch off there, but it was like, what was the time frame between your first session back after the 15 weeks out to your next meet? So I suppose it really stands to, in general, when you've trained for something for so long, because obviously you've been training powerlifting for a while then, or at least been in the gym for a while, barring the 15 weeks off, for people that maybe if they are off with an injury or if their lifestyle has had to change such a way they've had to miss a couple of weeks of training for other obligations, you haven't lost everything. Because I think and you've probably dealt with that now actually being a coach, where people think, Scott, I missed like 3 weeks, I'm back to square one. No, you're not. No. The skills are all still there. You're just going to take some time to train it back in. You're just a bit detrained. And that demonstrates that you were bedbound to 10 weeks of a turnaround and a 700 plus total, 720 or so. That's incredible. So well done to you for doing
Thank
that.
you very much.
That's huge. Well, even, man, listen, there's people that find it hard enough to get out of bed to go to the gym and they're perfectly healthy. So to come from where you were to that is huge. But this is kind of the next thing I wanted to say about that. And what I think it demonstrates is one of the things I think is brilliant about powerlifting is like, we all know, like, yes, it's cool to have, like, it gives you something tangible to work toward that's not strictly based on how you look or whatever, it's how you perform, and it's a scalable goal from competition to competition. You either put up a bigger total or you regress and you go back to the drawing board and say, what went wrong, what can we do next time? So if you look at it objectively, it's fantastic. But even on a subjective level, I think the social aspect and the support network and the, like, look at the recently the Chaos Open in your gym.
Yeah, very, very successful comp.
Not only was it a successful comp, but everybody gave a dig out.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? By the way, low key, savage, giving people jellies in between, man, game changer. Like,
yeah. Explain that one. That was an awful conversation with the wife, actually, because they were the leftover jellies from the wedding.
They were delicious.
Yeah.
Perfectly timed.
Me bagging them up 2 days before, and she was like, "Where's all the jellies going?" I was like, "Oh," and it was basically me just wanting to get them out of the house so I don't eat them all the time.
Man, but it was class because, like, that was the first meet I'd attended since my baby was born.
Yeah,
and like, was there, only had 2 lifters, but I was there from AM to the end.
Yeah.
And I was like fucking tired, like, you know what I mean? So when I think Claire came around with the jellies, I was like, oh my God, you angel.
Yeah.
Angel
Like
with the jellies
right now, yeah.
But in any case, like, you could definitely see, like, what a well-run competition for your very first one. And there's a couple of very experienced people there anyway. But I think it really spoke to a very strong sense of community in that gym. And I think it exists in all powerlifting gyms and strength performance gyms and just your semi-private gyms all over the country. But I think for you was that, like, because I can only imagine 15 weeks away from the barbell is one thing, but 15 weeks away from an environment where you've obviously been for a very long time must have been very, very tough. Yeah. So to be able to even go in and just shoot the shit with the boys for 15 minutes or 20 minutes must have been life. Jim must have been like, this is it. This is what it's all about.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's funny because the crew that we have now wasn't the crew back then. That gym has gone through a lot of reform and a lot of changes over the years. Yeah. So it was actually an older crew back then. Now, there's still some of them there now, but there was definitely some faces and stuff that we don't have around anymore that I do miss, and I do miss those days. We used to have like a Saturday for the boys, literally, like where it'd literally be only like powerlifters on a Saturday training. But yeah, just being able to go back in and be in that environment and be around people wanting to make themselves better, and especially because we were so new in the sport then as well, Chaos, and everyone around was so new in the sport. But I had been in the sport for quite a long at that stage. I think I would have been in the sport for like 4 years already. Like we've touched on it there that I've been along. This is my 10th year in this sport, 10th year in the sport, and my 14th year training, and I'm only 26. Yeah. So I've been around for a long, long time.
Did you work with RTS for a little while?
I did. I worked with RTS for 3 years, I believe.
If I'm not mistaken, that would have been probably your first, and I'd imagine many people's first introduction to like the RPE system.
RTS itself, when I worked with them, wasn't my first introduction. I was using the RPE system myself before that. I'd stumbled upon it again, just doing research and finding them.
Do you remember how you found it? Like I found it through Johnny Candido. Like.
Yeah, Candido would have been one of the first. Candido and just a couple of other people, and just researching and reading different types of programming. Before that, like when I trained in Ben Dunn, I was complete conjugate, complete Westside. I spent a long, long time. I don't want to say re-engineering conjugate because you can't do that, but like re-engineering the way they set up for geared lifters for myself as a raw lifter. Yeah. Taking a lot of their principles and applying them to myself as a raw lifter. When I started powerlifting at the age of like 16 up until I was like 18 or 19, I coached myself until before Worlds. I actually got Ben Royce was my first ever coach, by the way. I don't know if do you remember Ben Royce?
Yeah.
Ben Royce was my first ever coach. So I used to do conjugate and a lot of conjugate. And then I started moving towards like doing conjugate, but rather than actually maxing out, I would do conjugate with a capped RPE. Yeah. Where I'd be like, okay, well, rather than literally going as heavy as I can, all right, well, let's cap a little bit of an RPE here, you know?
Yeah.
And then I used it very, very heavily when I came back towards that city gym me, more and more towards myself. And then I decided to work with RTS on guided programming, which at the time I think it was Mike behind the guided programming, because I think they changed coaches who done it. So it was like being coached by Mike essentially, or by Mike. What am I trying to say? Lost my thought.
True guided program,
guided program,
which I imagine is a little bit more hands off.
It's hands off. And he was like indirectly being coached by him essentially, and you would use their website. Their website would kind of give you suggested loads and stuff like that. And then I decided to take the plunge and actually work with John, who's actually working with Shane Story, I believe, at the moment as well. And I worked with him for about 2 years ish, and that relationship ended quite abruptly. I wasn't very happy with both pricing and service of the company, which is not a thing on him himself. I really liked him as a person, and his coaching was quite good. I just found the prices they were charging for the services and the services we were getting just wasn't matching up. And I think that comes from being a coach and a powerlifter in Ireland, because we are so interconnected and close to each other. I found it was very non-personal, and I didn't like that. And I think that's something that a lot of Irish powerlifters need to kind of get grasp of and not respect, but I suppose just kind of become awake to, that it's very different over here.
Yeah.
We get a lot of time and attention from our coaches, and our coaches give us a lot more time and personal attention and are a lot more kind of personal towards us than other coaching companies and other things around the world, where it's very impersonal and very disconnected.
Yeah,
I think we're spoiled over that.
I completely agree. You're basically a customer less than like, it's not this. It's more of a parasocial relationship than an interpersonal relationship in a lot of ways. Like they're the coach, and you're just another person they assign things to. Yeah. And I suppose as well, it's like in other parts of the world, most people are scaling their coaching services into the hundreds of clients. So there's a lot of it that's automated, I would say. Whereas I think here, like powerlifting, as it currently exists, is still very much in its infancy. And I think that's why you're seeing this constant influx of new lifters. And I think you have to be honest with yourself with the service you can provide. This is actually something I was going to say to you about your coaching, because you were mentioning the whole time you were qualifying, it wasn't something you liked, it wasn't something you enjoyed. And I would imagine, and correct me now if I'm wrong, it's when you're looking strictly at the sterile clinical side of, this is it's very binary. This is how you coach people. This is the rep ranges they work in. This is what you do for this. Here's how you coach teams. This is the drills they do. Versus when you actually get to work with a person, it's such good crack, because the coaching, the lifting and the programming and the science behind it becomes very much secondary to the relationship you've got with that person. 100%. And those are the things that I think, if you invest in that piece, because I actually only had a chat yesterday with a young guy in a local gym who was talking about he wanted to become a PT and a powerlifting coach. Yeah. And so he was like asking for any advice. And I said, the one piece of advice I said, firstly, I said, why would somebody hire you and not me? And he's like, I don't know, they just hire you. I said, no. I said, I'm a prick, right? You don't be a prick. And it doesn't matter how much knowledge I have over you, you're the person people are going to enjoy talking to more. Because it's a quote I've brought up here before many, many times. Eric Cressy is a strength and conditioning coach in America. Yeah. And he said something like this before. He said, if somebody trained with you for 6 months and you put 30 pounds on their deadlift, but you're an asshole the whole time, all they're going to tell people is you're an asshole. Whereas if they could maybe have achieved not massive amount on their total in that time, but if they had such a good relationship with you and enjoyed the process and they felt listened to and they felt like it was a collaborative effort, they're going to yield so much more from that relationship, and it gives them much greater ground to work off of later. And I'd say that's probably something that I would say from an outside perspective, that's something I see with you and your lifters and people you work with. Your relationships seem to be brilliant. Whatever about, yes, they do very well on the platform as well, but you can definitely see that you have put a lot of time into them personally. And the connection is really there. And I think that's probably the strength not only of coaching for us as coaches and what keeps us in it and helps us enjoy it versus what you qualified as, but also for the lifter feeling valued in the role that they're serving. Because, lifting, particularly powerlifting, I think people don't get it's not just your next comp. It's a very long game. It's something you're going to be in for a while. So you gotta find the right people to back you for a very long time.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think a lot of that comes to my ability to actually be around my lifters constantly, which I really, really enjoy. And it's something that I have to give massive credit to Ben for, is building a place that we are able to have powerlifting, but it means that a lot of the lifters that I coach, pretty much all of them, I'm trying to think now at the moment, I don't think I actually coach anyone that doesn't lift in Chaos at the moment, really, that I'm constantly there. I'm constantly like every Saturday I may be there. Like if someone's prepping for a meet, we're really, really lucky. This is another thing in the Irish PF that our meets are always Saturday, Sunday all the time. So we can kind of gauge. I'm a big fan of doing like, okay, well then if you're on a Saturday, your day one starts on a Saturday and we literally replicate comp. So I'm able to be there constantly for my lifters, picking their loads, making sure their warm-ups are okay, telling what warm-ups they need to be doing, making a technical adjustment straight away if they need to. And it depends as well. On the day, some lifters I may just kind of leave them alone, especially if I'm like training hard myself, because I do my Saturdays as well myself.
Yeah.
But I'm constantly there, even throughout the week. I'm constantly with them, and I'm able to build that relationship as well. That I'm not just a person behind the screen. It's something that I really, really, really like. You know, like so many people can program. Like it's not that hard to get someone strong. And I know a lot of people on your podcast have said this before, and people say it time and time again. Making people strong is not hard. It's being able to connect with people on that level of where they want to stay with you to make them strong, and they want to stay in the sport, if you know. And we've had the conversation, me and you before, not to be named, but a lifter that I've had before, and you've had the experience with this lifter as well, that it just didn't work because, like, okay, I was getting strong. He was getting strong, and that was great and all. But the relationship wasn't there. And ultimately, and it's something that again, we can touch on right now, is that I think a lot of coaches don't know when to let lifters go. And I think they see it as just letting money go or letting revenue go. And that's fine. Now, I'm in a very good position that I have a stable job, and my powerlifting thing is obviously a separate thing. So I can choose that. And I get people that if it's their sole income, they can't just let people go. But even at that stage, if that is like your sole thing, I think it's very unfair for coaches not to realize when they actually need to turn around to lifters and be like, okay, this isn't working and it benefits the both of us.
Yeah. And
you need to go somewhere else. It's actually a conversation that I had with another client again there the other day, that I actually felt like I was doing them a disservice.
Right.
And I don't know if any coaches would ever do that to their client, but I turned around to this client and was just like, I'm actually not happy with the service that I'm providing you, simply because there was stuff going on kind of both ways, and they, you know, kind of weren't communicating to me. And I think it fell to the side of, then I was like, well, if this is happening, well, then I'm not doing this. But I got to the point where I was like, you can do really well and progress really well. But I think I'm the problem here. Do you know what I mean? I think I'm not communicating, or maybe I'm not doing something right. Now, we had a very, very long chat about it, and it came to a conclusion from both sides that we would communicate a little bit more and keep it going for a while. But I think a lot of coaches are not willing to turn around to clients and either send them in a different direction, or let them know that maybe, you know, just look back and be like, well, maybe I'm not doing my job right. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, I would completely concur with that. And I think it's a lot of the times, at firstly, well done, because that takes a degree of maturity and recognition in yourself that, like, even that you could be doing everything right, and the lifter could be doing everything right, but maybe it's just not the right fit.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's fine. I've had this with lifters in the past, and the sweet spot is when you both recognize it and you can have a mature, candid conversation about what it is. And I definitely find that, like, I think a big thing, you're right in that, I think a lot of coaches are afraid firstly to lose the financial side of it.
Yeah, and that's completely fair if it's their sole income. Like, I get that side of it. Do you know what I mean?
But I think another element of it is the coach doesn't want to feel like they have failed.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
And the thing I would always point out, if there is a coach listening who's in this scenario, right? If you have 20 lifters and one of them, right, is somebody that maybe thinks they need to go elsewhere, or you think they need to go elsewhere, but you've 19 other people who are all progressing. It's probably reflective that you know how you're doing your job, and it's just a
100%.
mishmash of personalities or timing is a big one, I think. Because what I've definitely found is you could have a lifter, and I've had this in the reverse, where lifters have come to me from other coaches and they pop off. Like, they do amazingly well. And it's not that I've waved the magic wand. No, don't get me wrong, I'm fucking excellent. But you know, but it's not that I'm doing anything exceptionally different than what the other person did. It's probably just a matter of they got all their, like, bad habits and immaturity as an athlete out of their system with this other coach. And when they made the switch, it was a clean slate. And they're like, I'm going to do everything this motherfucker says. I'm going to make sure I listen diligently, and I'm going to, you know, follow along with his loading strategy. I'm going to listen to my feedback every week. I'm going to communicate during the week and make sure that this person's informed of what's going on with me, and always take that into account. So we're constantly, like, there's constant flow of communication, whereas they might not have done that with the previous coach. So it doesn't mean the previous coach lacked ability. In fact, they might have set them up perfectly to hit a home run with me, and vice versa. I've seen Now, I'm lucky in the respect that I haven't had the lifters that have stayed with me in the sport past, say, the initial 3 to 6 month mark. Most of them stay in the long term, unless they're taking a break from powerlifting or whatever. The ones though that like I can think of like lifters that I've had that I coached through apps that have gone to other coaches, right? And you do see them do well. But again, a lot of them will say, well, that's informed off the back of the fact that I had a good like rookie comp with you or a good 2 or 3 comps with you. And now I can capitalize on that with somebody else. I think that's the most mature way to handle it, because the last thing you want to do is leave the person with firstly a negative perception of your abilities or just a negative perception of coaching. You want them to be able to say, that was a positive experience. Now I'm doing something different. So I would always say this is like sure. Like if you lose a lifter, it's a financial hit, right? Cool, whatever. But you don't want it to be a hit to powerlifting. I want that person to still lift. I want that person to still train. Yeah. So if I can leave them with a positive impression of me, and then that can bolster the relationship. Like if somebody went from me to you, I would want to say, yeah, I got on great with Ian, but now I want to try something different. I'm going to work with Scott for a while. And I want them to that if you had a conversation with them about our relationship, what was it like? What did Ian say? You could say, oh yeah, I would agree with pretty much everything he said. And we're going to use the fact that you've got that base of knowledge to do this. And your methods might just work a little better. It might be about the same. It might have just been a personality difference. Yeah, so I would completely concur with that. I do want to I want to pivot for a second because you brought it up earlier on. Definitely something I want to ask about. Yeah. You were a wild card entrant in the very first Abs Pro, all right?
I don't know if I was a wild card entrance. I'm not too sure. Again, I can't remember. I think I was genuinely just selected for the lineup.
But the youngest participant ever.
I think I'm still the youngest participant ever in the Abs Pro itself. Yeah,
that's an incredible.
And it was the first one as well.
That's incredible though. 2018.
Yeah. It's a long time ago. It's a long time ago. What's that? Jesus, 6 years ago?
The majority of the lifters that competed in that, I don't think even lift anymore.
No, Barry doesn't. Can't even remember who the rest of them were, to be honest with you. The only one I remember from the lineup is actually Barry.
Talk me through some of your experiences there, and I'm going to pull up.
It was great. I remember the conversation being had and talking about it, and I remember obviously because I'd had the trip to Canada with Jay and Louis, which by the way is absolutely hilarious. Like some of the stories I have, although I was very sick, some of the stories I have to give it off to Jay and Louis. Like it was a very, very enjoyable experience. Classic Jay doing classic Jay things. Like I remember him, all right.
Are these safe to say on this?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely safe. So I remember I was in a car with the two of them and we were driving around. Two of them had cowboy hats constantly. I think that was the Worlds that they actually got in trouble with for wearing the cowboy hats in the warm-up room. It's probably when Gaston brought in the rule, no hats as a coach. And I remember just singing songs or whatever, and it was great. And then I remember going to Walmart at one stage. Pretty sure Jay like changed into like hot pants and a vest and a cowboy hat and like rode an invisible horse around Walmart for a while.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Like that's some of the stuff that I love that absolutely sticks with me, that it's like harmless fun.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? That it's harming no one, it's someone making a fool of himself, and I think it gives a really good experience for the lifter. Now, if other people like, they hear that, they go, oh, that's super, but like that kind of stuff, do you know what I mean? Sticks with me. And that's then that kind of shaped me towards then when I heard he was doing the pro and stuff like that, that I was like, okay, well, I will give a hand if you need a hand, or if you want me to lift at it, or you want someone to lift at it, I have no problem, because it was like this fun guy who was, trying to make experiences enjoyable. So why wouldn't I give a hand out? And we've had this conversation before that, regardless of what Jay or anyone has done, when it comes to like me or Ben or Chaos, we've always had very good experiences with them and always willing to help him and the pro, if they ever need help, or do you know what I mean? I'll always promote it because it's been great, and I've had nothing but good experiences, and especially that first comp for him to recognize that I was a young talent, and allowed me to do it with such the caliber of lifters that we actually had in that comp. It was a really great experience, and it's something that I'll always remember, and I'll always be thankful that he chose me for it.
Well, incidentally, I can't even remember the context of the conversation, right? It was in a group chat on WhatsApp, and we're talking, this is years, it's like 2020 maybe, 2021? I don't know, years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
But they were talking about different clubs and who had what lifters, and some young lifter is not with us anymore now. They're not dead.
Rest in peace.
they're not in powerlifting anymore. But they said Chaos are shit, right? And then Jay replied saying they have Scott Dean. And I was like, damn, that's a compliment. Like, that wasn't it wasn't like, oh, don't fucking talk shit about other places. He was like, they have Scott Dean. You know, so that's I think that's like such a good endorsement. I remember
Thank you,
once,
Jay.
100%, man. I remember once I did a set of deadlifts, and I was training with Jake, and Jay was standing there with a coffee and just went, "Nice."
Yeah.
And Jake went, "What the fuck did you say to him?" He couldn't get over that
Yeah.
Jay said something nice about
something
my
nice,
set.
Yeah. No, I've always, especially when Jay was president and coach of the
Mm.
Irish PF, I've always had a very good relationship with him. He's always seen something in me that I never knew why. Do you know what I mean? And I was always thankful for any opportunity that he gave me to lift international. Like I've been lucky enough to lift internationally 5 times.
Yeah.
Sixth being
Yes,
Malta. I'm
yeah.
actually wearing the t-shirt right now.
I noticed when you came in. I was like,
the
this
missus
lad.
was in Malta a couple of months ago for work, and she brought this back. So I thought it'd be fitting for both of us going to Malta soon
Yeah.
to be wearing the t-shirt.
Yeah, Western Euros Part 2.
Yeah. Oh, part 2. We're going to move from bronze that was given to us late, and you know there was something there for the males team. And yeah, we'll see if we can move up in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. It was a really good experience being able to do that, and it's something like I'm essentially part of history. Do you know what I mean? It's cool,
100%,
like,
man.
and I can tell you now, being one of the first people ever, because I was one of the first people out to squat as well on the male side with a fire band behind you. I can tell anyone who's never done it before that is extremely warm and extremely terrifying and extremely distracting, and I don't ever want to do it again.
Do you know? Oh no, I want to say this first before I talk about the fire breathers or anything like that. So, I had a conversation with Jay before about all the wild stuff he gets up to the international meets, right?
Yeah.
And he said it before. He said, "You might never go on these again.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Like you may as well make them memorable." Because he says like there's so many people that were part of the team in 2018, 2019 that don't do it anymore.
Absolutely.
But they can always say, "Oh, Worlds 2019."
Absolutely.
When we did all that mad shit in that hotel, or we went out and had a great night out. Like, don't get me wrong, Jay is absolutely unhinged sometimes. But the thing is, you'll never have a trip away with him where you don't come back with a shitload of wild stories and memories.
Yeah.
So I can, and like I say this all the time. I am staunchly biased towards favouring everything about Jay, because Jay is the one that gave me my start as a full-time powerlifting coach. You know?
Absolutely, yeah.
So like I owe an awful lot to him. But just incidentally talking about the Abs Pro in 2018, I pulled up the list, and it's actually shocking. There's a good few people on here that don't lift anymore, as far as I can tell. You finished very high though for like such a high profile meet. You were there was only 24 lifters in the whole thing, and you finished 17th, which is pretty good given some of the names that you're ahead of, you know what I mean? And then you finished with where's Scott Dean there? 707.5 total. Yeah. 426 Wilks, and you did it at 20 years old.
Yeah, it was 20, yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
270 squat.
Yeah.
147.5 kilo bench. That's come on quite a bit since. And 290 deadlift.
Yeah.
But looking down through the list, Barry Piggott won.
Yeah.
Doesn't lift anymore. Lena O'Sullivan, unfortunately, is no longer with us.
Yeah.
Nereus Circus, I'm mispronouncing his name.
Yeah.
Doesn't lift anymore. Brona McPeak doesn't lift anymore.
Yeah.
Killian Carolyn doesn't lift anymore.
Have you heard rumours that she might be coming back?
I have heard rumours, but I've been hearing rumours for over a year.
Yeah, okay. Fair.
So,
I was hoping it was true.
Man, if I would love to get Brona and Barry on here.
Absolutely. Oh, man, please do.
Because that's do you know what, actually, this is one of the things that pisses me off, and I'm going to say it now, right? I train a lot of younger lifters now. A couple of sub-juniors, a couple of junior lifters that are really gearing towards wanting to do well at junior nationals and beyond and go international, right? And talking about like trying to basically dethrone who they see as the top lifters in those weight classes now. And I'm like, why are you looking at the other people, right? Because I get it maybe when you're up at that level and you're looking at podiums, but I'm like, and I've said it to them, who's Brona McPeak? And they're like, I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Like, that's outrageous to me.
Yeah, I've had this conversation recently with a lot of people that have talked to young kids. They don't even know who the likes of Brett Gibbs or anything is anymore.
Brett, like, how do you not know who Brett Gibbs
literally,
is?
they got powerlifting. Before COVID, his like pre-Sheffield numbers, he totaled something like 860 at 83 in the gym, which is still like, what was it? Duran's done, I think it was like 845, 847 or something like that. So like people don't realize how far ahead. And I was lucky enough to be in Canada to watch Brett Gibbs versus Russ that first time in Canada in person. It was sensational. I will never, ever, ever forget that meet, which is actually funny as well. It brings you that is, you know, Rondell Holt, obviously one of the best powerlifters in the world at the moment. I sat next to him and competed next to him in Canada on the bus. And I remember knowing him, and I was sitting on the bus going to the thing, and I remember looking at him going, "You're Rondell, aren't you?" And he's just like, "Yeah." I was just like, "Okay." And I remember being known, and I'm pretty sure that year at the junior, he won it as a junior champion. I think he out-totaled the open category at that.
Wow, okay.
Which I could be wrong, but I'm almost 100% certain he was close to or nearly out-totaled the open category as a junior and won the dual that year. And to see how far he's come on and knowing that I was sitting beside him on a bus, like that stuff, like you said, experiences that will live with me forever.
I'm going to trust that you're correct on the numbers, because in the couple of days before this, I was chatting to a few people about what would you ask Scott if you were me? They're like, Scott is weirdly good with dates and numbers.
Yeah.
So he will remember what people lifted on what day and what the comp was.
Unless you ask my wife, and then I get stuff all wrong.
Yeah, and by the way, massive congratulations!
Thank
on the
you very
wedding.
much.
Yeah, lovely. That was very nice. Yeah, it was very cool. That's definitely a lovely match. We had a great time, actually. You guys were very good to me in Malta last year because I was having a shit week. Iceland, sorry, yeah. We're going to Malta this September.
Yeah.
Iceland last September. You guys are very good to me, so I appreciate that a lot.
No worries at all. You were very good to, there was nothing like, there's one thing that I really appreciate about people, and it's something that I will always hold to. It's not how someone treats me, it's how someone treats my partner. And when we came back from that, Robin had nothing but nice things to say about you, and the way that, like, when she was just sitting beside you, how you interacted with her. And that actually really shaped my opinion of you. So thank you very much for that, because I will say, when we were talking earlier, when you called yourself a prick, okay, my first ever, like, knowing you for a year or so, the rumors that I hear from different people is like, Ian's just a real prick. And that was my whole shape of you until I actually got to know you. And I think that kind of brings into a conversation of people, like, you don't really know someone.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Especially in powerlifting, I think it's very, very important at the moment that people get shaped by people's personalities online or what other people will say about them. But until you actually sit down and have a conversation with that person, especially while they're training or in the gym, you don't truly know them. I think you get to see someone real well when you're in a gym, when you're training with them. And 100%. I think it's very important that if you have an opinion of someone or you want to get to know someone, train with them. Yeah. And you'll get to know them.
Yeah. Well, I would say all those people that said it's true, they're exactly right. I am a big prick.
Nah, you're not. You're not, Ian. You're a big softie.
But like, I think though you're dead right. And these are kinds of things that happen, because I did this happens at meets a lot. Like, people at meets are under a lot of stress.
Yep.
They're running back and forth. You've got a minute to get your attempts in. They might brush past you. There's nothing offensive meant by it. A lot of the time we're working in very small confines, so it's always easier to work together and understand how people interact you in those high pressure scenarios. Is not necessarily how they interact you when you're out doing a bit of training, when you're having a pint, when you're just talking bollocks and sitting in the audience at Western Euros. You know what I mean? So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I just, even bringing it back to Jay Farrand, another person I think is greatly misunderstood in powerlifting. Yes, he is an absolute degenerate, but he does have a very good heart, and anyone that's worked with him for any period of time will know that about him. He's also, like, I was going to say extremely honest, but probably too honest.
But I think that's one of the reasons why I get on with him so well, because if you ask anyone, if you ask Ben or Keane, people that I'm with every single day, they will tell you my biggest flaw is I'm extremely honest.
Good.
Extreme for my own good, like way, way, way too honest, like, for my own good, you know. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I think sometimes in coaching that really helps. Yeah. Because I won't sugarcoat it, but it's definitely, you need to be specific to the lifter and find a way to say it to the lifter. Do you know what I mean? You can't just turn around and you've probably had this in abs a few times where you're like, no, that's shit. You can't do that to a lot of people a lot of the time. Like, you can't just go, no, that was fucking shit, and just leave it at that.
Actually, observationally, right, I find, and this is nice because, like, you obviously coach a large cohort of different people as well, and individuals of varying age, varying backgrounds. So one thing I definitely notice is, and I'll get your take on this, is if somebody has come from a sporting background, they really want you to grab them by the neck and be like, that was fucking shit. Whereas sometimes if people are coming in and they've never been in a sport before, they've never faced any major amount of criticism, they have a much harder time dealing with being, okay, you need to go a little bit lighter today, or you need to pull back a little bit. That's been my experience, where they're way more attached. People that have never competed before in anything are more attached to, like, linear progression within a training block, or linear progression every week, versus there's people that I've got, like, say, powerlifters in it in a long time, or probably more so powerlifters in a long time, but definitely if I've had people come in from other things that have then been in powerlifting a while, they understand training is a bit more of a process than, say, well, I did X squat last week and now I need to go 5 kilos up or I'm shit. Do you know what I mean? What's your experience been with that?
Yeah, I'd actually, not that I didn't necessarily disagree, but I definitely find
The opposite.
sometimes when people come in from sports, they do have that more, depending on the sport as well. I will say I've never really coached people that have come from like a high level of sport background.
Yeah.
That sometimes, they'll come in and because they have the sport, and I think especially if you come from someone who's a field sports, where I always say I would love powerlifting if I was able to correct the mistake 6 days later. I love that about field sport. If you mess up, you have 6 days to be able to correct that mistake.
Yeah.
Powerlifting, you have 6 months, which can be really frustrating sometimes. And if you look at even my open powerlifting, you can see there is a lot of comps and a lot of times where things have not been corrected comp after comp after comp, which at the moment we have, I think, found that. And I think you will get to see that in person in Western Euros. There's I think it's going to be very good. Oh yeah. Let's just say that. Especially coming off the back of May. But yeah, no. I find it very, very individualized, and it's something that I pride myself on. Is in terms of coaching, I would be a lot more psychology based when it comes to lifters and both myself.
Yeah.
That treating them all as individuals and treating them all differently, but also having different tools you can pull out depending on when it is. Like obviously some lifters need a little bit more attention and need that, that grab and go, no, you need to do that. Other lifters may not need that, but then those lifters that may not need that, sometimes depending on the blocker, depending on the context, sometimes you need to be able to flip that switch.
Yeah.
It's something that I will admit myself is I am not necessarily good at training males, I feel.
Right.
Simply because, and I don't know whether it's kind of a harsh background for me growing up without having a father figure there. Every single person that knows me laughing at this because I constantly make dad jokes all the time. They're like, oh my God, he's talking about his dad again. Is that like with lads, especially because I put it on myself, I'm just like, why can't you do it? Just why aren't you doing it? Where I think I work a little bit better with females because I can be a little bit more empathetic on that side and understand emotions. And I think that comes from being brought up by my mom and constantly having that motherly nature that when I'm working with female athletes, I'm a little bit more towards that side. Now, every single person that I'm coaching right now is just like, no, he's not like that. I feel like I'm like that, and I feel like I can kind of communicate a little bit more on an emotional level and get that, especially because you know yourself, female athletes sometimes can be a little bit more to that side where when's the last time you'd seen a male athlete like fail a squat or fail a bench and go off and cry about it?
Yeah.
You get that with female athletes.
Absolutely.
I've never had that. Not saying males don't, because I've definitely done that myself where I've gone off and had a little bit of a cry, which is completely fine, by the way. It's okay. I do that quite often. But yeah, definitely on the female side of things, female athletes, I think I'm definitely better with because I am a little bit able to communicate better on like maybe a little bit more emotional level, and I feel it's because of that. And I feel with the males that and it's okay to admit that. I think another thing with coaches, we were talking about letting athletes go. Coaches are very, very, they're not willing to admit where they could do better or what they can't do. And I will 100% say that when it comes to coaching with males, I don't think I'm a great communicator with them. I could definitely do better. And I definitely go with a little bit more of that like rugby mentality of being like, yeah, you can do it, go ahead and do it, which I'm trying to get better at, which as a coach we should always strive to do. But I definitely find towards female coaches, I'm definitely a lot better because I'm able to understand that. And again, I think that's because of the bringing up I have. But coming back to the question you asked about that, about athletes, I generally, personally, I've never found one group versus the other. Personally for me, it's been so individualized, which is great that it's made me have this tool belt of different things, you know, I'm an array that I'm able to go in different directions, and it's not just, column A, column B.
And I think that's completely fair. And probably the better way to look at it is you might find correlators between groups, but I suppose it depends how you define the group. Like, are we talking male and female? Are we talking junior, open, senior, or junior, open, master? There's so many ways you can split it, but really it's down to the individual. Like, I would actually say I would completely agree with that sentiment. I find that with my female lifters, I've had to learn how to communicate in a way that is more palatable to them versus how I would communicate with the lads. And like it's a learning experience, and I've definitely made mistakes doing it as well. Of course. Where I've probably for me personally, and this is kind of always the tricky thing, is you're always going to proceed from what makes the most sense to you first, and then maybe have to change your messaging based on how the individual receives information. But I'm very much a facts over feelings all the time. I would much rather know how somebody feels or what something is despite how it makes me feel. Do you know what I mean? That's how I work, but not everybody necessarily works that way.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'd find them completely the opposite. I definitely am able to adjust people's trainings and stuff. Basically, obviously, when you see the facts and the hard data, it's all there in front of you, this and this and that. But I would bias my coaching towards a feeling basis and more of a psychological basis, because I had this conversation with someone the other day who was training. They had something to do. It was like a double as 6 or something like that. And I was talking to them about the psychological benefits of building that momentum and also giving yourself a little bit of leeway. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I massively do that with all my lifters, that I'm just like, we need to, the next week. Do you know what I mean? Let's just leave a bit. Let's build.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, especially if people took this into life, there's so many times that you need positive reinforcements or positive just things happen one after the other, that if you constantly build on them, the outcome is normally positive. And even if the outcome is negative, all of those positive experiences, there's so many of them that it doesn't just knock you back in that one negative experience or that one negative thing, just knock back all the positive things. So if you stack so many of them, if something negative comes out of it, or even one negative thing happens, who cares? You have so many positive things. It's another thing, that a conversation I had with people with, I was recently over coaching in England. I was handling some lifts for Eric at All England's, and there was a guy who I don't think he done as well, and it was something I said to him. I was like, just because you didn't hit a massive PR on this platform, didn't do as well, those PRs and those experiences you had in the gym don't just go away. Like, I feel like lifters forget that a lot, and it's something that I've had to teach myself, and it's why I think my lifting has progressed in the last couple of years, both from a mental aspect and not from a physical aspect. Because I think it's very easy physically to get strong, but if your mental side isn't there, that physical side doesn't show up. And I've had that for a long time, that I've physically been able to be up there with the best of them, but I think the mental side of things has never been there. Is that, like, just remember, just because you have this outcome doesn't mean all of this disappears. It's still there.
I feel like I'm listening to myself, because this is the exact conversation I've had, where it's like, if we look at, let's say, like, you're prepping for a meet for 3 months and you do excellently all prep, all peak, and the day doesn't go exactly how you want, that doesn't undo all this work. You've still done all those reps. You've still done all those sets. You've set those little PBs along the way. Sure, maybe things didn't play out well on the day, and there could be innumerable number of factors that went into that. Could have been comp day nerves, could have been the weigh-in, could have been the attempt selection, could have been the warm-ups, could have been the environment, could have been anything. But that one miss doesn't take away from all these hits. And I still and it's, man, do you know what? This is something I think is so underrated, and I've said this to so many lifters in the past 3 or 4 months that I feel like I'm like a fucking broken record sometimes. You can't put a price on competition day experience. You can be the strongest person in the gym and get to meet day and crumble. You know what I mean? So I think and that's the only place you can get it. So I would much rather go in myself personally and have a mediocre meet to say I did it and I had the experience of doing it, to then be informed the next time I'm on the platform. What can 100%. I learn from that experience? So, like Western Euros last year, I had a pretty fucking bad week. A friend of mine passed away. I didn't eat a whole pile that week. I skipped my last 2 taper sessions, and I came into the meet very flat. I found it very hard to like hype myself up, and I did not have a good day. Whereas a couple of months later, we had the Christmas qualifier. You had a very nice mustache at that meet. If I did.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
That was very nice.
Might bring it back. Who knows?
I was actually just about to ask. That should make a return. That was pretty dope. But in any case, I took some of the lessons from what happened in that meet, and I put the intent behind the prep into this one. I was coming in carrying a few niggles, but I still performed significantly better, and I had a much better time like on the actual comp day. Now, obviously, it was a domestic meet, the Irish PF.
But of course.
It's all the meets are always way rowdier, good crack versus international meets. Though I will say, shout out to the Icelandic Federation that hosted. They did a really, really good job.
Yeah, to be fair, that was out of the 5 internationals I've been to, that was like probably the most hype I've ever had on a platform. So it was good.
That was a nice environment to lift in, regardless. But in any case, and I think that's kind of what you need to do. It's like, you know, especially if you've only done 2 or 3 meets, the likelihood is if you stay in powerlifting long enough, you're going to be in it. You're probably going to do 10 plus. Don't worry about what you did in meet. Like, I don't even remember what I totaled in my 3rd meet. I don't care. It doesn't matter, because you'll total more later. You know what I mean?
No, 100%.
Have you ever had this with lifters of your own?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you looked at my open powerlifting, you can see I've done like 30 comps.
I've heard about this. Somebody said this to me, and I looked at your open powerlifting, and I couldn't get over how long the list was.
Yeah, I've done a lot of comps. This is what I'm trying to say to people, and I don't want to be that guy where like, I've been around for years. because I'm only 26, but this is something that I've tried to get across to people, is that I've been around for a long time. I've had a lot of different experiences, and I've gone through pretty much everything that every lifter could imagine they could go through and come back from. So yeah, definitely that experience of, you know, if you have something, I will touch on when you said there about your Westerns performance last year. It's something that I actually want to say to you is people do not realize the impact on physical strength when there are emotional things going on. And it's a conversation I've had to have with lifters a lot. When there is emotional stress going on or emotional thing going on in your life, people do not realize and underestimate the impact that will have on them. They always think, oh, well, this thing, you know, happened or whatever, this negative thing happened and I'm going to be able to get really strong off, or I'll use that emotions. People don't realize how much that drains you. You may feel physically fine, but you will contest to this, when there's something that goes on in your life and it's a very, very emotional thing, it absolutely eats into your training. And that's okay. And don't beat yourself up about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like the fact that you turned up to that company, you were able to do something is massive. And that is a massive accomplishment in itself. And then you were able to come away, you were able to deal with whatever you deal with, and then you came back to another comp and were able to perform better. But once you realize that comp, the thing that happened, it wasn't anything that you had done. It was external stressors, extremely emotional stressors on you. And that will impact, and that's completely fine. And don't beat yourself up about it. That's one thing I'll say to people that are listening. And it's a conversation that I have again and again with lifters that may be going through, whether it's stress with work, whether it's stress with their partner, you know what I mean? Whether anything happens, it could literally be anything. It could be, I don't know, you're in Super Value that day and some guy really stresses you out or something like that. You don't realize how much that impacts you. You should, and you need to take a step back and be easier on yourself. And again, this comes back to the whole emotional and psychological side of it. There's probably people listening here that are just like, oh, get on with it and train. I'm like, that's completely fine if that's your method to it. But you don't realize that stuff does have a massive impact, and you will actually have a longer, better lifting career if you realize that. You go in, do the work that you need to do, and just live. And don't be so hard on yourself.
Well, thank you for saying that.
No, of course.
No, I do appreciate it. I can actually tell you something about that week, and it was the most bizarre week of my life. Because we found out on I was lifting on Saturday. You lifted on the Saturday, same day as me. You were in the morning. Yes. Yeah. So we flew on Thursday. I found out the Tuesday before we left that Dean had passed away, right? Yeah. And Dean was a friend of mine for 20 years. Yeah. So it was this big debate between Tuesday and Wednesday of, will I still go, right? Because I didn't really want to miss his funeral. But I talked to a few people and they were like, look, do you really think he would have wanted you to put in all this work and then not go? Yeah. So you should still go and we'll see what happens. And I only found out when I got over that the funeral was actually happening on the Friday, which was a bit of a bummer. Yeah. But, so Saturday lifted. Like, don't get me wrong. As much as I do not think it was a great representation of how well I could do, I'm still happy enough with what it was for what it was. And as I said, overall, the couple of days we were away were like a very nice cathartic experience. Everyone was very good. Even before anyone knew what had happened, I had a good time with everybody. It was a nice opportunity to get to know people better. Yourself, Robin, even getting away with Connor Campbell for a while. Me and Beck are obviously good pals. His partner, Karis, Joanne and Megan, obviously had a great time. Like I'm going to forget a few people, but everybody that was there was lovely to be around. And then I came home on the Tuesday morning. And that was when my missus told me we were having a baby. So a week, like from the Tuesday, I find out Dean had passed, to a week later, find out it was the weirdest experience. Like simultaneously fucking awful and then absolutely fucking incredible. So you're right though. Like those emotional highs and lows are very turbulent. And it was a very strange time. I don't want to say strictly that it was difficult to navigate, but it was definitely strange to navigate.
Yeah, of course. But it's something like, it's like anything in life. You're thrown into something you've never been in before. Do you know what I mean? Especially in those circumstances. Now, I don't know if you've ever been in those circumstances before, but most people won't be in those circumstances before, especially as well with the baby, if it's your first time. And I believe that was your first international then as well, was it?
It was,
Yeah, exactly. So
like first that way.
Yeah, exactly. So it's so difficult that it's just like, okay, where do I go? And rather than trying to find the path to go, just go wherever you think is right. And if it's not the right way to go, it doesn't matter. It'll figure its way out. You know?
To actually know something, since you know a lot of YouTube fitness, you obviously know who Elliot Hulse is.
Yep.
So I used to like Elliot Hulse, not for his training videos, but he'd talk a lot. He'd answer people's questions, things like that, right? And yo, Elliot, right?
Yeah.
So he had one before where he was talking about how life goes in seasons.
Yep.
And he was saying in his life, he had kind of found this one part of his life where, you know, his business was doing really good with strength camp and he's making his YouTube videos. But it's like, he says, like you're in a river and you have to go with the flow of it, go with the current. I said he was like fighting against it for songs to try and stay in this one season of his life. That bad things started to happen. Like he started like getting sick. He tore his bicep. You know, his business started to take a hit. So you're exactly right. I definitely found with that, it's like, I just need to like go with the flow these next couple of weeks. And just see where the tide takes me. And now, luckily, it obviously went well enough that by November, I was able to put things together and have a good day.
And a really comp,
And, you know, like things have definitely been, since the new year anyway, things have definitely been absolutely fantastic. Like the podcast doing well. So I did, you're actually my first episode back.
Yeah, I seen that actually on your thing today, that you're back in the studio today. I was like, oh, well, no pressure here. So it actually made me feel a little bit more comfortable as well, because I was like, well, you are not well, do you know what I mean? As in verse that you haven't been doing it in sequences. So it's your first time back, so you may be a little bit rusty, although you've done it so many times. So it actually made me feel a little bit easier then this morning as well. So, you know, I was able to come in and be able to do that. But in terms of actually what I want to touch on there with you is when you said that you had a good comp, is what do you consider a good comp with your athletes or yourself? Because this is a conversation I have. I know what I expect of my athletes and what I consider a good comp, whether they don't think it is or not. In my mind, it's a good comp. What do you think it is?
So for me personally, like it's going to be different for me versus what I want from my lifters, obviously. You know what I mean? For me, like I care a lot less about going 9 for 9, right?
Yeah.
I just want to have. So right, this is like a big brain. This is like I'm going to splurge my thoughts out at you here for a minute. There's going to be a day you're going to have your last competition, right?
Yeah.
And all the picture, now for you, that's probably going to be 60 odd competitions, right?
No, but like actually, just before you go into that, if you have that tangent, or if we go off this tangent, sorry, when I was sick, that abs pro competition before I got sick, that could have been my last ever competition. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So you don't know.
And that could have been a cool one to go out on, though, in fairness.
Absolutely, yeah.
But so that's what I'm thinking. So when I step out onto the platform, right, this could be the last time I do it, at least for a while. And really, when everyone sees a video or my photos of that meet, they're not going to care specifically what's on the bar. Because for the average person, past a certain amount of weight, it all just is heavy, right? So I want to have an incredible time. So when I've kind of the Christmas qualifier, I feel like I nailed what I enjoy the most.
Okay.
I had my two pals, I had Vinny and I had James, right? They're both two of my lifters. Like, you're both going to handle me, right? And they're like, this is great. We're going to get to beat you up a little bit because you always beat us up. And I was like, oh no, that's not how I get hype. I don't want you to hit me.
I'm going to hit you.
I'm going to fucking attack you, right? And I just had a ball doing that. And then, do you know what? Like, I have a pro wrestling background, so working the audience a little bit is something I like to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it gave it a little bit of that. And I just had a good time. You know what I mean? So that first and foremost. And then, the thing is, you might have people that walk out on the platform that lift the most weight and you could hear a pin drop in the place.
Yeah.
Whereas you'll have somebody walk out like, do you know Squat Man, Owen Man?
Yeah.
People love that kid from Limerick, man. Because it doesn't matter what he's lifting, he's just a big character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same with, actually, incidentally, when you came out, you were coming out to like the white girl.
It was Miley Cyrus.
Yeah,
the Miley Cyrus pop song. Yeah, that came into my open deadlift and had a little bit of a dance.
Man, I love that. Like, this is part of the reason I love the series is because it's a series of cool moments. It's cool. People lift a lot of weight, but you create these like stories and narratives, and you tell more about who the person is. Part of the motivation for this podcast. Yeah. So this is it. Like, no one is ultimately going to care how much I lifted, but they're going to say, anytime I saw Ian on the platform, it was always savage. It was always good crack.
Yeah, so it's the experience they've had with you. Yes. They're going to remember.
So that's kind of what I kind of go for. Whether or not I'm going to get a total PB or an individual PB kind of is less important. They're cool, but less important for the lifters. So this is very interesting because I have this, it depends on what meet they're on, obviously. Okay. But if it's your first meet, I'm like, we need to have a chat about what is your best outcome for today. What is something that you can walk in today and do and be happy with? Because especially the longer you're in the sport, it's very rarely going to be a total PB, a DOTS PB at a new low body weight, individual PBs across the board, and a 9 for 9 day. It's very rarely going to be that, right? So in particular, one of my lifters was like, well, I want to go 3 for 3 on squats, but I don't mind if I miss my last bench and last deadlift. Okay. I'm like, okay, so conservative on these, a bit more ambitious on these. Okay. And then of course, we went conservative on the squats and the lifter was upset. Like, I felt like I had more. It's like, okay, but this is what we agreed. So there has to be, I think you have to have a very clear definition of what success looks like to you and what it looks like to them. Podium finishes are cool. PBs are cool. But like, if somebody says to me, like, I just want to go in and not embarrass myself. Like I had a lifter who previously, before they came to me, had done a meet and they bombed out on their squats.
Oh no.
So I was like, okay, I think success is going in and hitting at least that number you bombed out on 3 times. Hit that for 1. And I would say that 1 for 3 is fine. They ended up squatting, I think, 12.5 kilos over that number on that day.
Yeah.
That's success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything after that point's just a bonus.
Yeah, of course.
You know? So frankly, for a lot of lifters, just showing up and doing it is success. For some people, getting out and getting, 3 for 9, one successful lift on each one is a success. For some people, it's just having a clean 9 for 9 day.
Yeah.
And like I've had lifters as well that have come back from injury, and it was just really important to me to get up in front of my parents or my partner and do some lifting. So I think it's hard to tangibly say what success is for me for my lifters. As long as we've agreed on what is going to be a good outcome for them and they're satisfied and they're happy that we've lived up to that, I suppose that's probably the best way I can answer that question.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah.
What's yours?
Mine. So me first, what success is for me, I suppose, is for the last couple of meets, it's definitely been the psychological side of things that I've spoke about. I know I constantly speak about it, but it's something that I've put a lot of effort into over the last couple of years because like I've said, the strength and the ability has always been there. But I feel like, especially in training or whatever, just the psychological side has definitely let me down. So the last couple of meets has been that thing that I've been talking about, building momentum. So if you look at even when I came back down to the 105s or whatever, it's like, okay, did I put 2.5 kilo on my squat and then my bench and then my deadlift or whatever? And I done all 3 of them in the meet and then the total went up a little bit. It was building those positive reinforcements. I went from constantly missing squats all the time to, I think in the last 5 meets, I've gone 3 for 3 in squats where I haven't actually missed a squat. And I technically haven't even pushed my squat because there's always been a lot more there. The meet recently that we went, the goal was always to get over that 800 kilo total as a 105 because it constantly plagued me, and we knew once we broke that barrier that it would skyrocket. So the conversation we had before the last one was like, okay, we need to get over that, but what that looks like, individual lifts, we don't care about. So it was a conversation, if you speak to Ben, that I had on the day. So say for May, I missed my opening squat, got called on depth, right? Bullshit call, but anyway. I still went up 10 kilos, 5 kilo less than what we wanted to go up with. And I took less than the number that I wanted for my third or knew we were capable of. Because as I turned around, as soon as I failed that squat, I turned around to them and I was like, the total is all that matters. Yeah. Which leads into the conversation of what you said about 9 for 9. I don't give a fuck about 9 for 9 anymore. Who cares? Who cares about 9 for 9? Like, if you go 9 for 9, that's cool. But if you haven't got better than the last time, who cares? So I was like, the total is all that matters. So we literally stacked the chips, came to bench even. Ben, I think, wanted like 190 and I was like, no, I'm telling you 187. Went up 2.5. It was a 2.5 kilo pure, stacked the chips on deadlift, and the outcome was so good. Yeah. So for me, having a great meet is just doing slightly better than before and continuously stacking them on both a physical and a mental side to be able to build up towards that super meet eventually, which I feel is probably going to come in Malta. Amazing. I really, really hope it will be because training is dictating that, especially today. Today is a really heavy day, so we'll see what happens after this podcast. That I think I've put myself in the position that I've had a small win every single comp to. Now the big thing and my goals for Malta is going out and the success for me would be, regardless of the outcome, is putting every single thing that I've learned over those last couple of meets and corrected, doing them all in this one super meet. That's what success will look like for me, regardless of the outcome. Now, of course, medals would be nice. Yeah. Lucky enough to get some of them last year. Aiming to hopefully get some of them this year. You know yourself, obviously internationals is always about placing rather than, you know what I mean, personal goals. But if I am able to take every single thing that I've learned and regardless of the outcome, put that into this meet, that'll be a successful meet for me. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
100%.
In terms of my lifters, I'm a little bit different to you. So I typically tend to not have conversations with my lifters and ask them what they want and what their outcome would like to be. Now, if they turn around to me and they say, look, I want to have a bit of fun, let's do this meet for this and that, that's fine. But I typically don't actually have that conversation with them and being like, what do you want from this meet? Simply because to me, it's doing better than you've done before. My sole job is to make you do better than you've done before while also having an enjoyable experience. Yeah. Okay. I should know you well enough to be able to make sure you're having an enjoyable experience. And I should have trained you well enough that we're doing better than before. So if you put 2.5 kilos on your total, regardless of how the lifts went, like you may have not hit a squat, a bench, or a deadlift PB, but you hit the 3 lifts kind of, you know, way sometimes you might have a good squat day and a bad bench and a bad deadlift day and your total doesn't come out. If we're able to hit all them, even if they're not PBs, and we tie it together and hit a 2.5 total PB, to me, that is success. Because my sole job you're hiring me to do is to be in this sport and get better every single time. Yeah. What is the point of powerlifting? It is to get better. Now, there is differences depending. For instance, I have a lifter this weekend who's moving back down a weight category, may not hit the total that she hit there, but we have a total from being in this weight category. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you have a metric to beat.
Exactly. So doing better than she done before in that, regardless of what lifts we hit, if she's done better than she before, for me, that is success and I'm doing my job right. And once they have fun. Now, like I said, if a lifter comes to me and they want to have that conversation and they're like, okay, well, this is the outcomes I want, that's fine. But I actually typically don't bring that conversation up with them because the expectation is you're hiring me as a coach in powerlifting to go compete. And the point of competing is doing better than you done last time. So I solely look at that total. Unless, again, if it's like, say, for instance, their training hasn't gone well or something and they're down on body weight, well, then rather than the total, it might be a DOTS PR because then technically they're stronger in relative strength. But yeah, my sole objective and success for that is literally just doing better on that total. If that makes sense.
Oh, it does 100%. And I think that's like, you're right, absolutely. Objectively speaking, what everyone is looking to do is increase their total every single time. Let me ask you one last question on that, and then I am going to let you go because I know you have to train.
It's absolutely fine. I'm enjoying this.
You mentioned the mindset was the biggest thing you need to work on, the athletic mindset. This is something that I think is like such an understated piece of the puzzle when it comes to being a long-term success in every sport, but obviously we're fixating on powerlifting. Do you know Amelia Potter? Potts Thinks?
I've heard of her.
Yeah.
And I think one of the people in Chaos actually recently started working with her. I'm not too sure. But yeah, I have heard of her, but I don't know much of her stuff.
So she lives in the UK. I've never communicated with her one-on-one basis, but I know a lot of the lifters over here, including Alex Cremens, has worked with her in the past. And has done amazing work to bring them into the mindset for success that has led them to be, like, because again, many athletes are very strong, but how you come together on meet day is really, and I can actually think of a guy that I coach at the moment. He's outstanding junior lift. He's actually competing on Sunday. He's outstanding, right? Could be a force to be reckoned with in this sport. But like, if he goes 2 for 3 on squats, he's deflated for the rest of the day. He might only come back around on 2nd or 3rd deadlift. Like, that's how bad it can get. That's how defeated he can get. Because he's not thinking of the big picture. He's still thinking of individual PBs in each lift. So as somebody who's been in that position, in that boat where, you know, maybe the mental side of it let you down compared to your abilities, but now you've come out the other side and you're building towards this monster meet now in Malta. What have been the biggest lessons that you think you could say if somebody was in your position now? Let's say you're talking to yourself 2 years ago, say, you know, if you do this, this, and this, you're going to have a better outcome down the road.
So 100%. I know a lot of people on this podcast and other people talk all the time is becoming more process orientated and not worrying about the outcome. So every time I go into the gym now, I am not necessarily worried about what specific numbers I am lifting or what I want to do. It's kind of, okay, what is a successful performance today for me? Okay. One thing I think of right now. So for instance, I'm training a day early today, right now. Okay. I have the heaviest squat, bench, and deadlift of this block that I need to do. But I'm in my mind when I woke up this morning, I know I'm training a day early. Anyone who tells you 24 hours less recovery and training a day early shouldn't impact you, it 100% does, especially when you set a microcycle the way it is, if it's consistent. So I know that's one factor. The second one is I'm doing this podcast today, right? With how much anxiety that I suffer coming here today, I know that's definitely going to be a factor because I know it affects me. It's just who I am. And unfortunately, it's something I deal with on a daily basis. So I've gone through that process of being like, okay, well, I know those two things are stacked against me. So what do I need to do? Okay. I had a very good breakfast this morning, so I know that's going to fuel me. I've been quite hydrated. I've got some form of caffeine in me right now. I have extra caffeine here and water that as soon as I leave this, I can prepare myself, okay? So I've taken all those necessary steps for me to be prepared from a mental side of things that now when I go into the gym and I start warming up, I know exactly how I'm going to warm up. I know how things feel. And regardless of what that top end single is, I know that I've prepared every single thing to do well in that session. So regardless of the outcome, it is a successful session. And that session, if it is lower than last week, doesn't mean I've got any weaker. That's something that I struggled with a long times. And it's like, I could be 10 weeks out and maybe I don't hit something that I've hit before and I'd be like, well, I'm not going to be strong on meet day. Do you know what I mean? So for me, and it's something that I advise people, is just kind of breaking that process down a little bit and being like, okay, doing every single thing in your control, acknowledging the factors. I know some people might think to be like, oh, well, don't think negatively that way, saying that is going to impact you. But I think you need to let those things come in and let those things go into your mind and be like, okay, they could be a factor. I'm not saying they are. There's a difference now between getting into excuses. Like if I go now and I train like shit, I'm like, oh, well, I was on the podcast with Ian, so that impacted me. Do you know what I mean? That's an excuse. But it's something that I have in the back of my mind that I'm like, okay, don't get upset and don't get in that mindset if I'm not able to perform well, because there's multiple things stacked against me. So I'm stacking things to make sure I have a good session. But if I don't theoretically have a good session because it might be not as good as last week, it's technically still a successful session. Does that make sense? So that's something that I've done more and more and more. And it was doing more meets and stacking those individual wins. Like for instance, going 3 for 3 on my squats. I rarely fail squats now. Like rarely fail a squat. That has built so much confidence in me now that every time I put a barbell on my back, where I used to have a fear. Do you know what I mean? Think of that. So it's that thing coming back that I said about building that momentum from week to week to week, to comp. It's something that I had to learn, is just train and go through the process. Who cares if you're not lifting the most amount of weights? Just go in and train and then eventually stack those chips and it will come. And the other thing I would say is not letting powerlifting run your life. I've had a massive bad experience with that in previous relationships and stuff, that everything was so focused around my training. For instance, like I said, like today, if this was me 2 years ago, I would have turned around to you and said, no, I can't do that. I have to train. Which, do you know what I mean? Why would you do that? This is a great opportunity for me to come here, and I thank you for allowing me to come here and speak. But if it was me 2 years ago, I would have been so wound up about my training, being like, I'm not going to have a good performance. Do you know what I mean? This and that. And I needed to change that mindset, that I'm like, okay, training is just a part of my life and it's something that I want to do. Now it's a massive part and it's something that I need to do on the daily for my own mental health. But it got to the point where it was negatively impacting it as well. So I needed to figure out, okay, what do I do? It's like, okay, well then let's change what is a successful outcome of training, and then that. So it's changing your mindset around that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think what you've very much identified the fact that you need to be willing to accept that externals can impact what you expect in the gym, but even a minor decrease in load or performance is not indicative of long-term success. In fact, just going in and doing the training is probably, as you mentioned, stacking the chips in your favor for success down the road. And it's managing that the whole way, whether you're 30 weeks out, 12 weeks out, 2 weeks out. It's limiting the external variables, but taking them into account where applicable. Like you said, training a day early, coming on a podcast, and frankly, sitting here and have talk show with me for 2 hours, that's stressful.
Yeah. There's one other thing as well that I actually wanted to mention, and I was thinking about it yesterday. When it comes to the psychological side of things, the biggest thing that I changed was, and it was something that about 2 years ago when I was going through therapy for a while, I live my life with a lot of what ifs. For instance, when I was coming here this morning, quite high anxiety, I was like, well, what if, like, for instance, I show up to the wrong place? What if Ian doesn't want me here anymore? Do you know what I mean? What if this or that? Do you know what I mean? And I always crept into my training that I would think is like, what if I don't get my third attempt? What if I don't get my second attempt? What if I can't hit this specific number? Then I can't get that total. So I can actually remember the day. It was one day in chaos, and I know it sounds really weird. It's like Eddie Hall before his deadlift looking into the mirror. I remember looking in and changing that what if. So rather than being a negative what if and being like, what if I don't get this? I looked at myself and goes, but what if I do? What if I do make this lift? What if I do hit that total? What if I do win these medals? What if I do everything that I want to do? Why am I saying what if I don't and having such a negative experience? Why don't I turn around to myself and picture in my mind and be like, but what if I do? Imagine, do you know what I mean? We always talk about that what if in a negative experience of what if we don't do something. And it's one thing I would just kind of, if anyone gets out of this podcast, is in terms of your training, look at yourself and say, but what if you do? Now, there's got to be realistic expectations. Reality has to live up to, your expectations. You can't just have, what if I become a world champion? 99% of people aren't. But in terms of your training, change that negative what if to such a positive what if, and look and just be like, but what if you did do that? Now, if you don't, fair enough. But imagine if you did. Imagine what that outcome, we always imagine what that negative outcome looks like. Just picture that positive outcome. that elation of everyone around you cheering for that lift, for you reaching that total, for you getting that medal, and just change that negative what if to a positive what if. And I guarantee you it will change your mindset and your training for the better.
That is a perfect place to leave it. Thank you very much, Scott
Thank you very
Dean.
much, Ian.
Appreciate it.